The mahogany casket was barely in the ground before the champagne corks started popping. Most families wait until the wake to start drinking. But my sister Isabella and her fiancé Greg had started in the limousine on the way back from the cemetery. I sat in the jump seat, watching them clink crystal flutes, the bubbles fizzing just like the excitement bubbling beneath their faux mourning veils. They weren't celebrating my father's life. They were celebrating his death, or more accurately, they were celebrating what his death meant for their bank accounts. My father, Elias Blackwood, had been a titan of industry, a man who built a real estate empire from dust. He was also a man who loved puzzles, mechanisms, and control. But in his final years, dementia had softened his sharp edges, leaving him vulnerable to sharks, and the biggest shark of all was his own daughter. We arrived at Blackwood Manor, the sprawling $20 million estate that had been the crown jewel of my father's portfolio. It was a Gothic masterpiece of stone and iron, sitting on 50 acres of prime land. I knew every inch of it, not because I lived there in luxury, but because, for the last 5 years, while Isabella was finding herself in Paris and Milan on Daddy's credit card, I was the one fixing the slate roof in the rain. I was the one upgrading the electrical grid. I was the one wiping the drool from my father's chin when he forgot how to swallow. I was the dutiful son, the mechanic, the caretaker. And today, according to Isabella, I was the trespasser. The reading of the will took place in the Grand Library. The family lawyer, Miss Henderson, looked uncomfortable. He kept glancing at me with apologetic eyes. Isabella sat on the velvet sofa, Greg's arm draped possessively over her shoulders. Greg was a brand manager, which meant he was unemployed with a trust fund and a heavy cocaine habit. He smirked at me, checking his Rolex, bored by the formality of robbing me blind. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and began. The preamble was standard. Then came the asset. To my daughter, Isabella, Henderson read, his voice shaking slightly. I leave the entirety of the Blackwood estate, including the mansion, the guest houses, the pool complex, and all contents therein. I also leave the liquidity fund of $5 million to maintain the property. Isabella let out a squeal that was entirely undignified for a grieving daughter. She kissed Greg. "We got it, babe," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "We actually got it." Henderson turned to me. He hesitated, and to my son, Arthur, who has always appreciated the smaller mechanics of life. "I leave the contents of safety deposit box 404. And this." Henderson reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, heavy object. He slid it across the mahogany table. It was a key. It wasn't a gold key. It wasn't a shiny ceremonial key. It was a heavy, ugly chunk of iron, pitted with rust, looking like something from a medieval dungeon. It had no teeth, just a strange, hexagonal barrel. Isabella burst out laughing. It was a cruel, hyena-like sound. "A key?" she cackled. "Daddy left you a piece of scrap metal. What does it open, Arthur? The shed? The garbage chute?" Greg chimed in, leaning forward, his cologne wafting across the table like a toxic cloud. "Maybe it opens his heart, Artie. Sentimental value, right? Better put it on a chain so you don't lose your inheritance." I picked up the key. It was cold, but as my thumb brushed against the hexagonal barrel, I felt something. A pattern. Micro grooves etched into the iron that you couldn't see with the naked eye. My father hadn't lost his mind. He had set a trap, and he knew I was the only one smart enough to spring it. "Is that it?" I asked calmly. "That is the entirety of the bequest," Henderson said, closing the folder. Isabella stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "Well, Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "this is awkward. Greg and I are planning a little celebration tonight. A housewarming. Since this is my house now, I'm going to have to ask you to pack your things. The guest cottage is going to be turned into a yoga studio. Tonight? I asked. We buried him 3 hours ago. Life goes on, Greg said, standing up and looming over me. He was 6'4", a former college linebacker who used his size to intimidate. And honestly, seeing you moping around in your work boots is killing the vibe. You have 1 hour to clear out your junk. After that, my security will escort you out. I looked at them. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply pocketed the rusty key. 1 hour. I said, that's all I need. I went to my room in the caretaker's cottage. I didn't pack my clothes. I packed my laptop. I packed my schematic, and I retrieved the one thing I had installed in this house that Isabella knew nothing about, the node. To understand the payoff, you have to understand the context. 2 years ago, my father had a moment of lucidity. He suspected Isabella and Greg were manipulating his doctors to change his medication, making him more pliable to sign over power of attorney. He called me in the middle of the night. He told me he couldn't stop them legally. They had compromised the lawyers, but he could stop them structurally. He gave me $10 million from a hidden offshore account and told me to renovate the house. I did. But I didn't just paint walls. I turned Blackwood Manor into a fortress, a smart fortress. Every lock, every light, every window, every drop of water, and every BTU of heat was controlled by a central server buried deep in the bedrock beneath the estate. And the rusty key. It wasn't a key to a door. It was a physical cryptographic token. It was the administrator key. I spent my hour not packing, but verifying the connection. I watched from my window as the caterers arrived. Isabella hadn't planned this party today. She had planned it weeks ago. She knew she was getting the house. This was premeditated grave dancing. At the 59-minute mark, Greg banged on my door. "Time's up, Cinderella," he shouted. "Get your truck off my driveway before I have it towed." I walked out with nothing but my backpack. Isabella was standing on the main porch, her phone out. She was live streaming to her 50,000 followers. "So guys," she said to the camera, panning over to me, "this is my brother leaving the estate. It's so sad when family gets jealous of success. Show them your inheritance, Arthur. Show them the rusty key." She shoved the phone in my face. The comments on the screen were scrolling fast. LMAO. "What a loser, kick him out, Bella." I looked into the camera lens. "Enjoy the party, Isabella," I said. "Make sure you close the windows. It might get cold." She laughed, shooing me away. "Get lost, loser." I got into my beat-up truck and drove down the long, winding driveway. I didn't go far. I parked just outside the massive iron gates, hidden in a grove of trees. I opened my laptop. I inserted the rusty iron key into a custom port I had built. The screen flashed green. "Administrator access granted. Welcome, architect." I waited. I watched the security feed. By 9:08 p.m., the party was in full swing. 200 guests, champagne flowing, a DJ blasting bass-heavy house music in the grand ballroom where my father's casket had stood just yesterday. Isabella was drunk, dancing on a table. Greg was in the corner, doing lines of coke off a silver tray that had belonged to my grandmother. It was time. I initiated phase 1, the lockdown. On my screen, I tapped the command perimeter seal. At the main gate, the heavy iron doors slammed shut with a clang that vibrated through the ground. The magnetic locks engaged. Inside the house, the storm shutters, hidden steel plates recessed into the window frames, descended. The music was so loud nobody noticed at first. It wasn't until a guest tried to step out onto the terrace for a smoke that the panic started. The glass doors wouldn't open. He pushed, he pulled. Nothing. He tried the window. Steel. I watched on the cameras. The confusion spread like a virus. Isabella stumbled off the table. "Who closed the shutters?" she screamed, slurring her words. It's ruining the aesthetic. Open them. She stormed over to the wall panel, the high-tech smart home interface I had installed. She mashed the buttons. Open, open, you stupid thing. The screen on the wall changed. It went black. Then red text appeared. System lockdown. Unauthorized occupants detected. Phase 2. Sensory deprivation. I tapped another key. Lighting. Blackout. The chandeliers died. The landscape lights died. The DJ's booth died. The entire mansion plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. The only light came from the panicked glow of 200 cell phones, turning on simultaneously. The screams started. Rich, entitled screams. Then, I grabbed the microphone connected to the PA system. My voice boomed through the hidden speakers in every room of the house, amplified and distorted to sound like the voice of God. Attention, I said. This property is currently under the control of the Blackwood Trust. You are trespassing. Isabella's voice shrieked back, echoing in the dark. Arthur, I know it's you. Turn the lights back on right now, or I'm calling the police. Please do, I replied calmly. But cell service is blocked within the Faraday cage of the panic room, and the whole house is a panic room. Greg's voice roared out next. He was trying to be the hero. Listen to me, you little freak. I'm going to find you and I'm going to break your jaw. I'm going to the breaker box. I watched on the infrared camera as Greg stumbled through the dark kitchen toward the basement door. Greg, I said, my voice silky smooth. I wouldn't touch that door handle if I were you. The biometric scanners are active, and you aren't registered. Greg didn't listen. He grabbed the metal handle. Zap. A low voltage, high amperage shock, enough to incapacitate a bull, but not kill it, surged through the handle. Greg flew back 5 feet, landing on his ass, screaming like a child. He curled into a ball, sobbing, holding his hand. Greg, Isabella screamed. Oh my God, he's killing us. I'm not killing anyone, I announced. I'm just securing my asset. Phase 3, the liquidation. For the next 3 hours, I let them stew. The temperature in the house began to drop. I set the HVAC to 50 degrees. The guests were shivering in their cocktail dresses. The toilets stopped flushing, water main valve closed. The Wi-Fi was dead. Finally, I saw Isabella huddled near the fireplace, trying to burn antique books to get warm. She was crying, her makeup was smeared, she looked broken. I activated the video screen above the fireplace. My face appeared, lit by the glow of my laptop. Arthur, she sobbed, running to the screen. Arthur, please, we're freezing. People are sick. Let us out. I can't do that, Isabella, I said. You see, the house detects intruders, and since you don't have the key, the house thinks you're a burglar. I have the deed, she screamed, waving a piece of paper. Daddy gave it to me. Daddy gave you the structure, I corrected. Read the fine print, Isabella. Clause 14, Section B. The ownership of the residential structure is subject to the land lease held by the Blackwood Trust. Isabella froze. What? You own the bricks, I explained. I own the land, I own the water pipes, I own the electrical grid, I own the road you drove in on, and I own the security system that is currently keeping you safe from the outside world. I held up the rusty iron key, and the rent, I continued, is overdue. Greg limped into the frame, holding his burnt hand. The arrogance was gone. He looked small. What do you want, Arthur? We'll give you money. Just open the damn doors. I don't want your money, Greg, I said. I want a confession. Confession for what? I want you to tell the camera and the live stream that I just reactivated on all the smart TVs in the house, how you forced Dad to change the will, how you threatened to put him in a state home if he didn't sign. Isabella went pale. I have the audio logs, Bella. I lied, partially. The house records everything, but I want to hear you say it. Say it and the doors open. Refuse, and the temperature drops to 40 degrees. Isabella looked at the guests. The elite of the city was staring at her, shivering, judging. They weren't her friends anymore. They were hostages of her greed. "Tell him," a woman in a fur coat shouted. "Just tell him so we can leave." Isabella broke. She slumped against the mantel. We told him he was losing his mind," she whispered. "We told him he wouldn't remember us. We made him sign the papers when he was confused." "Louder," I commanded. "We tricked him," she screamed, tearing at her hair. "We tricked him. Are you happy? We wanted the money. We're broke. Greg owes owing debts to bad people. We needed the house to pay them off. Just let us go." I smiled. "Thank you." I hit a button. System unlock. The steel shutters groaned and retracted. The front doors clicked open. The lights flickered back on, blinding them. But the party was over. As the guests stampeded out, stepping over spilled champagne and broken glass, they were met with flashing lights. Not the paparazzi, the police. I had called them an hour ago. I had sent them the recording of the confession while Isabella was screaming it. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. I walked up the driveway as the officers were handcuffing Greg. He tried to struggle, but the officer slammed him against the hood of the patrol car. Isabella was sitting on the steps, weeping into her hands. She looked up and saw me. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I still own the house." "Actually," a voice said from behind me. It was Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. He had arrived with the police. "The confession you just made invokes the unworthy heir doctrine. Isabella, by admitting to fraud and coercion to obtain the inheritance, you have legally forfeited your claim. The estate reverts to the secondary beneficiary." Isabella looked at me. Her eyes were wide with horror. "You?" she gasped. "Me," I said. I walked past her, up the stone steps of my house. I stopped at the massive oak front door. I took the rusty iron key out of my pocket. I inserted it into the hidden keyhole under the handle that nobody else knew existed. Click. I turned back to her. "Get off my property. You're trespassing." Epilogue. 6 months later, the renovations were complete. I had removed the gaudy chandeliers Isabella had installed and restored the original ironwork. The house was quiet, peaceful. I was in the library, working on a new security protocol for a client in Zurich. When my phone rang, it was a number I had blocked, but it was coming through a burner phone. I answered. "Arthur?" It was Isabella. She sounded rough. The background noise sounded like a busy diner or a shelter. "Arthur, please don't hang up. Greg left me. The lawyers took everything. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch, but I have to leave tomorrow. I'm your sister." I looked at the portrait of my father hanging over the mantel. I remembered the way she laughed at his funeral. I remembered the rusty key comment. "I don't have a sister," I said calmly. "She died the day she chose money over family." "Arthur, wait. I just need a few thousand, just to get an apartment. Please. The house is worth 20 million. The house isn't for sale," I said. "And neither is my forgiveness." I hung up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the immaculate lawn. I touched the rusty key that now hung around my neck on a titanium chain. I poured myself a glass of my father's favorite scotch. I raised it to the empty room, to the smaller mechanics of life, I whispered. And then I engaged the night locks. The house hummed in response, safe, secure, and finally mine.
My sister Chloe's wedding was perfect. It cost more than a house and looked like a royal affair. I, on the other hand, had just been informed that I wasn't quite royal enough. A smug wedding planner approached me with a clipboard and said, "Alara Vance, right this way." I followed, expecting to be led to the family table. We passed table 1, table 2, all the way to table 12 at the edge of the dance floor, and then we kept walking. Right towards the swinging metal door that says, "Staff only." I said, "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. The family table is back there." The planner didn't even look at me. She said, "No mistake, you're at table 13, per the bride's specific instructions." She pushed the door open. Inside, the noise was deafening. Clanging dishes, shouting chefs, the hiss of industrial dishwashers, and there, crammed between a rolling rack of dirty plates and a fire extinguisher, was a tiny wobbly card table with a single chair. Table 13. My sister Chloe, the bride, caught my eye from the head table. She smiled, raised her glass, and blew me a kiss. She thought I was trash, to be hidden away with the garbage. What Chloe didn't know is that I was the one who paid for every single crystal, every rose, every drop of champagne, and in exactly 5 minutes, her perfect wedding was going to be over. To understand why I was seated in the kitchen, you have to rewind about 20 years. In my family there were 2 daughters, the golden child and the scapegoat. Chloe was the perfect one, blonde, bubbly, and ruthless. I was the quiet one, the artistic one, the disappointment. Our mother, Margaret, worshipped status. And in her eyes, Chloe was a future investment. I was a liability. I remember 10 years ago, my father came into the kitchen while I was drawing. He whispered, "It's beautiful, Alara. You have your grandmother's hands." But then my mother shouted from the other room, "Richard, Chloe needs new riding boots." And the light in his eyes dimmed. When our father got sick, I dropped out of my art scholarship to care for him. Chloe was just too busy with sorority rush at her university. My mother was too stressed to visit. For 6 months it was just me and him. Before he passed, he pointed to a drawer and said, "My journal. In the drawer. Take it. Don't let them break you, Alara. You're worth more than all of them." After the funeral, which Chloe complained wasn't open bar, I found out what my father meant. I read his entry. He wrote, "My Alara has the artist's soul, but Margaret only sees value in status. I fear I've left my company in her hands, but I didn't leave my daughter empty-handed. I sold a small patent, years ago, and put the money in a trust for Alara, in her name only. It's not a fortune, but it's a seed. Don't let them break you, my night owl." Night owl, it was his nickname for me. The trust fund wasn't massive, but it was enough. I didn't buy a new car or a fancy apartment. I used my art degree to quietly build an online art gallery called Night Owl Holdings. I specialized in finding and promoting unknown artists. Over the next 7 years I turned that seed into a forest. I was a multi-millionaire, and my family had no idea. To them, I was still Alara, the struggling artist. Until the day Chloe announced her engagement. 6 months ago, my mother was complaining. She said, "It's just dreadful. Your father's company isn't what it was. We simply can't afford the wedding Chloe deserves. We'll be humiliated." I looked at them and said, "What if I paid for it?" Chloe laughed and said, "You, with what? Your Etsy sales?" I told them, "I've had a few good years. I can help. I want to, for the family." My mother's eyes narrowed. She asked, "How much help?" "The venue alone is $50,000. I said, "I'll cover it. All of it. $100,000. On one condition. It's an anonymous gift. No one knows it's from me. Just make sure I have a place at the table." Margaret smiled like a shark and said, "Oh, Alara, darling. Of course, your family. You'll be right there with us. You'll be right there with us." Those words echoed in my head for 6 months. I believed them. Until the wedding day. When I arrived at the bridal suite, Chloe pointed to a dress hanging on the outside of the closet door. It was a hideous, ill-fitting, beige satin. She said, "Oh, you're not a bridesmaid, silly. James's sister took the last spot. That's just a family dress. Now go find the makeup lady. You look half dead." Later, during the photos, I tried to step in next to my mother. She put a stiff arm out blocking me and said, "Just the core family for this one, Alara. You understand." Back in the present, standing in the kitchen next to the dirty dishes, I should have left, but I was frozen. I sent a text to Chloe saying, "This is a mistake, right? You put me in the kitchen." A moment later, she stormed in, her expensive dress dragging on the greasy floor. She hissed, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "What wrong with me? You sat me by the trash?" She said, "Alara, honestly, be grateful you're even here. James's family is incredibly selective. Your whole struggling artist vibe is just embarrassing. We couldn't have you at the main table." I asked, "But in the kitchen?" She screamed, "It's my day, my day. For once in your life, can you not make this about you? Just eat your chicken, stay out of sight, and don't ruin this for me." Then James, the groom, walked in holding champagne. He smirked and said, "Ah, the kitchen staff. Guess you do count." Try not to steal any of the silverware, all right? He laughed, grabbed Chloe's hand, and they swept out. And just like that, the last thread of hope snapped. My father's words came back to me. Don't let them break you. They hadn't just broken me. They had shattered me, swept me under the rug, and expected me to pay for the privilege. The chef looked at me with kind eyes and asked, "You okay, honey? Rich family giving you trouble?" I looked at my phone. On the screen was my banking app. Pending transfer $100,000, scheduled for 10:00 p.m. It was 9:55 p.m. I asked the chef, "Do you have a back office? Somewhere quiet?" I went into the tiny office and dialed. I said, "Mr. Henderson, it's Alara Vance." "Yes, thank you. I'm calling about the $100,000 transfer scheduled for 10:00 p.m. I need you to put an immediate stop payment on it." "Yes, all of it." "The reason, service is not rendered." I hung up. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Chloe says you're making a scene. Stay in the kitchen. Do not ruin this for her." I walked out of the office. I nodded to the chef, and he smiled and said, "Go get him, kid." I pushed through the swinging door. The ballroom was warm, filled with laughter. I walked past table 12, past table 10. I wasn't walking to the exit. I was walking towards the head table. I saw the DJ's podium. The mic was live. I tapped the microphone. A high-pitched feedback squeal cut through the ballroom. The music stopped. The laughter died. Every single eye was on me. My mother stood up and yelled, "Alara, what do you think you're doing? Sit down." I spoke into the mic, my voice booming. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alara Vance. I'm the other sister, the one you'll find listed on table 13, kitchen." A ripple of gasps went through the room. Chloe hissed, "Get off the stage." "You're drunk," I said. "I'm not drunk, Chloe. I'm just so moved by this whole celebration. The flowers, the orchestra, this stunning $50,000 venue. It's breathtaking. You told me, Mother, that Chloe deserved the best, that James's family expected the best, and I agreed." James stood up and shouted, "What is this? Security?" I continued, "Which is why I agreed to pay for it. All of it." Total silence filled the room. James laughed nervously and said, "She's lying. She's a broke, crazy artist. She doesn't have 2 pennies to rub together." I looked at them and said, "Am I, Mother, Chloe, did you forget to tell James about the $100,000 check I wrote to cover this whole performance? The check that my company, Night Owl Holdings, provided as a gift so you could impress your new in-laws." My mother looked like she was going to faint. I held up my phone and said, "But sitting back there next to the industrial dishwasher, I had an epiphany. My father always told me to invest wisely, and this is a bad investment. So, Chloe, James, I have some bad news. The check, I just cancelled it. As of now, all services are being rendered unpaid." The bomb exploded. The wedding planner ran up, waving an iPad, screaming, "Mrs. Vance, the payment. It's been declined. The caterers, the venue, the bar, none of it's been paid." James's father stood up and yelled, "What is this? Margaret, James, you told us her family was solvent." Chloe let out a high-pitched wail. You ruined it. You ruined my day." I replied, "No, Chloe, you did. You wanted me to know my place. Well, my place isn't in your kitchen. My place is as the CEO of the company our father actually trusted." I pulled the small journal from my purse and held it up. "He left me this. He knew. He always knew who I was. He also knew who you were. Enjoy the appetizers, everyone. I believe the main course has been indefinitely delayed." I turned and walked through the ballroom. I heard Chloe sobbing. I heard my mother yelling. I pushed open the main doors and stepped out into the cool night air. For the first time in my life, I felt free. 6 months later, Chloe and James never made it to the honeymoon. His family, furious over the fraud and public humiliation, cut him off completely. Their marriage was annulled 6 days later. My mother's status evaporated. The bank foreclosed on the house. She and Chloe now share a 1-bedroom apartment. I was standing in my new art gallery in Paris. My partner Julian handed me a glass of champagne and said, "To the new Paris branch of Night Owl Holdings, and to its brilliant CEO." I smiled and said, "I'll drink to that." I finally understood what my father meant. It wasn't about the money, it was about worth. For 20 years, they told me I was worthless, and I finally proved I was priceless. So what do you think? Was Alara right to pull the plug on the wedding in the most public way possible? Or should she have just endured the humiliation for the sake of the family? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories where the bill always comes due, remember to subscribe to Karma's Last Laugh.
Imagine the most expensive wedding venue in the state on the most perfect Saturday in June. White roses everywhere, String quartet playing Vivaldi, 300 guests in designer clothes. And right by the valet stand, in a cheap black polo and khakis, there I am. My own brother walks past me, shoves his keys into my chest, and says loud enough for the entire receiving line to hear, "Try not to scratch it this time, little bro. Parking cars is the only thing you've ever been good at." Everyone laughs. My parents shake their heads like I'm the family embarrassment. 40 minutes later, those same guests watch armed security drag my brother, still in his tuxedo, out of his own reception while the bride screams my name. This is the story of how the brother they treated like a servant turned out to own the castle they were getting married in. Stay until the end. The part where my father tries to pay the bill is pure gold. Let's go back 8 years, so you understand why I let them humiliate me that long. I was never the son my parents bragged about. That was always Ethan. Captain of everything, Harvard Business School, engaged to an influencer with 600,000 followers. I was the quiet one who dropped out of college sophomore year to flip houses nobody wanted. My parents called it manual labor. They told everyone I was finding myself because they were ashamed to admit their son worked with his hands. What they never knew was that the first house I bought for $22,000 at a tax auction is now worth $4.8 million. I kept buying foreclosures, abandoned estates, properties so ugly banks wouldn't touch them. I turned them into cash. 5 years ago, I found the crown jewel, a crumbling 1920s mansion on 50 acres an hour outside the city. The bank was desperate. I paid cash. I spent 2 years and $12 million restoring it to better than original condition. I turned it into the most exclusive wedding and event venue in the country. The Ashford Estate. Booked solid for the next 4 years. Celebrities, politicians, royalty, and I never put my name on the website. The public face is a management company. To my family, I'm still the dropout who does something with real estate and can barely afford rent. Ethan announced his engagement last year and chose the Ashford Estate for the wedding. He bragged to everyone it was the only place good enough for him. My parents offered to pay for everything to show off. I let them. I even gave them the family discount through the sales team. 30% off. They never knew the discount was actually 100% because I own the place. The contract was signed under the LLC. My name appears exactly nowhere. I told the venue manager, Lauren, to treat me like any other staff member the day of the wedding. I wanted to see how far they would go when they thought I was powerless. The morning of the wedding, I showed up in the staff polo. Ethan saw me and lost it. He screamed that I was embarrassing him in front of his future in-laws. He told me the only way I was allowed on the property was if I worked. He literally handed me the valet keys and said, "Park cars. Stay out of sight. And for God's sake, don't talk to any guests." My mother pulled me aside and whispered that if I ruined one photo, she would never speak to me again. My father slipped me a $50 bill for gas and told me to try to act normal for once. I took the keys, I smiled, and I parked every single car that day. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, vintage Ferraris. Guests asked me to pose for photos with their cars. I did. Every time Ethan walked past, he made a comment. "Faster, valet. Don't block the entrance with your existence." The photographer even caught him on video flicking a tip at me like I was a stripper. That clip went viral later, but not for the reason he thought. The ceremony came and went. Ethan married Chloe in front of 400 people who still believed I was the hired help. Then the reception started. Open bar. 10-course dinner. Fireworks display that cost more than most people's houses. At 8:30, the venue manager, Lauren, found me by the valet stand. She was nervous. She whispered, "They're ready for the big entrance. Are you sure you want to wait until now?" I told her it was time. I walked through the staff entrance, past the kitchen, and straight into the grand ballroom. 300 guests were seated. Ethan and Chloe were about to have their first dance. The lights dimmed. The string quartet stopped. I stepped onto the small stage where the band had been playing. I took the microphone. The room went silent. Ethan saw me and turned red. He marched toward the stage, shouting, "What the hell are you doing? Get off." I spoke into the mic, calm and clear. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Logan Ashford, and I own this venue. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop." I continued. "Today has been educational. I've parked your cars. I've been tipped like a servant. I've been told I'm an embarrassment by my own family. So before the first dance, I thought I'd clear a few things up." I nodded to Lauren. The lights came up. The massive screen behind me lit up with the property deed, the LLC paperwork, and finally a photo of me holding the original purchase contract from 5 years ago. My name in bold. Logan Ashford, sole owner of the Ashford estate. The room erupted in gasps. Ethan froze halfway to the stage. Chloe's jaw actually dropped. My mother fainted into her chair. My father looked like he was having a stroke. I kept going. "Ethan, you booked your wedding at the venue I own. Mom, Dad, you paid for a wedding at the house I bought with the money you said I'd never make. And all day you treated me like the help. So here's what's going to happen now." I turned to the security team, 6 men in black suits who had been waiting in the wings. "Please escort my brother, his new wife, and my parents off the property immediately. Their reservation ended 5 minutes ago." Ethan started screaming, "You can't do this. This is my wedding." I looked at him and smiled. "Actually, this is my house, and you're trespassing." Security moved in. 2 guards grabbed Ethan by the arms. He was still in his tuxedo, bow tie crooked, face purple. Chloe was shrieking, veil flying, trying to hit the guards with her bouquet. My mother was crying hysterically, mascara running down her face like war paint. My father tried the reasonable approach. "Son, we're family. Let's talk about this." I looked at him. "Family doesn't make family park cars at their own property. You have 10 minutes to leave before I call the police for trespassing." The best part, the guests started clapping, slowly at first, then louder. Some even stood. They watched my family get marched out past the ice sculptures and the $10,000 cake. Ethan was barefoot. Security had taken his shoes so he couldn't run. Chloe lost a $6,000 heel in the gravel. My mother kept screaming my name like I was murdering them. I just stood on stage and waved goodbye. 6 months later, the Ashford estate is more popular than ever. We've raised prices 20% and we're still booked solid. Ethan and Chloe's wedding photos never made it to the magazine. Instead, the video of the groom being carried out by security went viral. 42 million views and counting. They're getting divorced already. My parents lost most of their friends. Nobody wants to be associated with that level of entitlement. Last month, Ethan showed up at my office begging for a job. Any job, even valet. I told him we don't hire people who throw keys at the staff. He cried in the lobby. Security escorted him out again. Some habits die hard. These days I still park my own car at the staff entrance. Old habit. But now I do it in a car that costs more than their house. And every time I walk through the gates of the estate, I bought with the money they swore I'd never earn. I remember one thing. Real wealth isn't loud. It doesn't need to brag. It just waits quietly in the shadows until the perfect day to take the microphone and remind everyone who really holds the keys. If you've ever been treated like the help by your own family, type keys in the comments right now. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. New story every single day. See you tomorrow for another round of Karma's Last Laugh.
The mahogany casket was still open when it happened. Everyone in black, clutching tissues, whispering how tragic it was that Dad died so young. And right there between the finger sandwiches and the floral arrangements that cost more than most people's rent, my stepmother Karen grabs my arm, digs her fake nails in, and hisses loud enough for the entire room to hear. You're not welcome here. This is my house now. Pack your little suitcase and get out before I have you removed. 20 relatives turn to stare. Some gasp. Some pretend they didn't hear. Exactly 11 minutes later, the family lawyer walks in with a folder, and Karen learns the house she just claimed actually belongs to the 27-year-old. She just tried to throw out on the street. Stay until the end. What happened when the moving trucks arrived the next morning is pure ice-cold karma. Let's go back 4 years, so you understand why I stayed silent that long. Dad married Karen when I was 19. She was 41, former pageant queen, all teeth and venom. Within 6 months, she convinced him I was a financial burden. Dad still loved me, but he was weak when it came to her. So he paid for my college, gave me a credit card for emergencies, and quietly asked me to stay away from the house so there would be peace. I agreed. I graduated top of my class in finance, took every internship, saved every cent. At 23, I started buying distressed properties at courthouse auctions. Dad never knew. Karen made sure he did. She told him I was bumming around Europe because she was embarrassed her stepdaughter wore thrift store clothes to holidays. The truth, I was building an empire, one foreclosure at a time. 2 years ago I found the perfect one. The 6-bedroom colonial on 5 acres that Dad had always dreamed of retiring in. Karen had been nagging him for years to upgrade. He finally bought it, with cash. I quietly wired him through a trust he never knew existed. Title was put in an LLC called Maple Trust Holdings. Dad thought it was his banker being clever with taxes. Karen thought she hit the jackpot. I was the sole owner of the LLC. Dad died never knowing his difficult daughter had bought him his dream house. The will reading was scheduled for the day after the funeral. Karen couldn't wait. She wanted to establish dominance immediately. That's why she chose the funeral lunch to humiliate me. I flew in that morning wearing the same black dress I'd owned since college. Karen spotted me the second I walked through the door of the house I paid for. She marched over in her $5,000 black designer suit, pearls the size of marbles, and announced to the room, "Everyone, this is my stepdaughter. She's been living off my husband's generosity for years. Now that he's gone, that stops today. This is my house, and she is leaving." She actually snapped her fingers at the caterers. "Someone calls security. We have an uninvited guest." My aunt tried to protest. Karen cut her off. "Blood only, darling. Step doesn't count." Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Grab your sad little purse and go. You have 5 minutes." I didn't move. I just checked my watch. At exactly 2:15 the front door opened again. In walked Miss Hargrove, Dad's estate attorney, carrying a leather briefcase and a very thick folder. Karen's smile could have cut glass. She assumed this was the moment she became a millionaire widow. She greeted him with air kisses. "Finally, let's get this over with so we can all move on." Miss Hargrove didn't smile back. He looked straight at me and said, "Miss Harper, thank you for being here. We can begin." Karen laughed. "Begin what? She's not in the will." Mr. Hargrove opened the folder and started reading aloud. He began with the minor bequests, the cousins, the charity. Then he got to the main asset, the residence at 42 Maple Ridge Lane, including all furnishings, vehicles and surrounding 5 acres, held by Maple Trust Holdings, passes in its entirety to the sole beneficiary of the trust, Miss Emily Harper. You could hear Karen's heartbeat stop. Miss Hargrove continued. Furthermore, the late Miss Harper added a codicil 6 months ago witnessed and notarized, stating that in the event his spouse Karen Harper attempts to claim ownership or residency without Miss Harper's written consent, she is to vacate the premises within 24 hours or face immediate eviction proceeding. Karen went white under her spray tan. She started screaming that it was fraud, that I forged it, that Dad would never. Mr. Hargrove calmly slid a copy of the signed codicil across the table. Dad's signature, 2 witnesses, notary seal, dated, legal, undeniable. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, but the room had gone so silent you could hear the ice melting in the lemonade. "Karen, you have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings. Anything left behind will be donated to charity tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. She lunged at me. 2 off-duty police officers I had hired for security caught her by the arms. She was shrieking, mascara running, calling me every name she could think of. My aunt started clapping, then my cousins, then the entire room. Slow, steady applause while Karen was gently escorted to the front door, the same door she had just tried to throw me out of. She tried everything in those 24 hours. She called the police, they told her it was a civil matter. And she called locksmiths. None would touch it once they saw the LLC paperwork. She tried to barricade herself in the master bedroom. The moving company I hired simply removed the door from its hinges. By 8:45 the next morning, 3 moving trucks were lined up in the driveway. Karen stood on the front lawn in sweatpants, hair in curlers, watching strangers box up her designer wardrobe. She begged. She cried. She offered to share the house. I stood on the porch drinking coffee from the mug Dad used every morning and said, "You told me blood only counts. Well, this house was bought with my blood, my sweat, and my money. You have 10 minutes before the trucks leave with everything." At 8:59 she was holding one suitcase and her purse. At 9 sharp the gates closed behind the last truck. I changed the locks, the alarm codes, and the Wi-Fi password. Then I opened a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch and toasted to the quietest house I'd ever known. 6 months later the house is officially mine, in every way. I turned Dad's old study into my office. Karen is renting a 1-bedroom 40 minutes away. She got a job selling luxury handbags at the mall. Ironic considering she's carrying the same bags she used to own. Last week she tried to friend request me on social media. I declined and posted a photo of the new marble kitchen island, with the caption, "Some people inherit houses, others inherit consequences." It got 200,000 likes. These days I still set an extra place at the dinner table for Dad. He never knew I was the one who gave him his dream home, but somewhere I hope he's watching and finally proud of the daughter he was told was a failure. If you've ever had a step-parent try to erase you, type 24 hours in the comments right now. Smash subscribe, turn on notifications, new story every single day. See you tomorrow for another round of Karma's Last Laugh.